Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today, our mission, if you will, is to really break down Chapter 3 of this, well, quite old but fascinating book, The Science of Getting Rich, by Wattles.
Right, 1910, wasn't it? And it's very direct. Wattles wasn't really about depth philosophical debates here. He aimed to give practical steps for people who, first and foremost, needed to, well, get rich.
Exactly. It's pragmatic, though he does mention, it's kind of interesting, that his ideas stem from a monistic view of the universe.
Yeah, the idea that everything comes from one single fundamental substance.
But he encourages readers to sort of take his core ideas on faith initially, almost like you'd accept a scientific principle from, say, Edison, and just try it out.
In Chapter 3, it jumps right into a really core question. Is opportunity monopolized? Basically, have a few people grabbed all the chances, leaving none for anyone else.
Okay, let's unpack that. His starting point is pretty bold.
Very. He flat out says no one is kept poor because opportunity has been snatched away or because wealth is hoarded.
Which, I mean, even today, that might raise some eyebrows, considering economic realities.
Definitely. But what's intriguing is how he tackles the obvious counterarguments. He admits that in really established fields, like think huge railway systems back then, getting in and taking over, almost impossible.
That makes sense. Like trying to start a rival to a tech giant today from scratch.
Exactly. But, and this is key, he argues that even if those specific doors seem closed, new ones are always opening. He uses the example of electric railways, which were emerging then.
Right, as a new field full of potential. He even nods to air travel as a future big thing.
It's about seeing that opportunity isn't static, it's dynamic, which, probably resonates if you've ever felt stuck.
So for you listening, if one path feels blocked, maybe the key is looking for those new avenues that are just starting to form.
And he doesn't just limit it to brand new industries, even within seemingly constrained areas like factory work, which was a huge reality then.
Yeah, for so many people.
He suggests people aren't necessarily trapped. He points to opportunities in small-scale intensive farming, says it held great promise.
Which, okay, immediately makes you think, how is a factory worker supposed to suddenly buy land?
Right. And Wattles anticipates that skepticism. It's good he flags that he'll address the practical side of getting resources like land later in the book. So, something to keep in mind.
Okay, got it. So hold that thought.
Another really crucial idea he introduces is this concept of the shifting tide of opportunity.
Ah, okay. What does he mean by that?
He believed that the areas holding the most promise change over time, driven by what society needs, how it evolves.
And he specifically looked at the U.S. when he was writing.
Yes, suggesting the momentum, the tide, was shifting towards agriculture and related businesses and professions, offering more direct paths to getting ahead than, say, factory work at that specific moment.
It gives such a valuable historical perspective on how economies change, doesn't it? What was hot then might not be now, and vice versa.
Absolutely. So for you, the listener, looking at today's world, what industries or sectors feel like they're in that rising tide right now?
Good question.
And the key lesson really is about going with the tide instead of, fighting against it, spotting where society's needs are growing. That could be vital.
Okay, let's go back to the factory worker scenario more directly. Wattles has a somewhat, maybe controversial take here.
Yeah, he doesn't frame them as purely victims of employers or the capitalist system.
He argues their situation stems largely from not doing things in a certain way. This core concept he builds throughout the book, it's not just external forces.
Which puts a lot of emphasis on individual action and mindset, even within a tough system.
And he even throws out this really interesting idea. Workers could organize collectively.
Right. Form their own cooperative stores, even industries. He mentions examples from Belgium.
That idea of collective agency, even within what seems like a rigid structure, is actually quite empowering. It suggests that even if individual options seem slim, there's power in group action guided by these principles.
And he keeps circling back to this fundamental point. The law of wealth, his principles for getting rich, applies to everyone, regardless of social class.
He's saying individual workers aren't actually bound by the perceived limits of their situation if they adopt this specific approach he's outlining.
Exactly. Which leads us to this really powerful shift in perspective. The idea that poverty isn't actually caused by a lack of wealth in the world.
Ah, the abundance idea. He uses some pretty vivid examples here.
He really does. He claims there's enough building material in the U.S. alone to build a palace for every family on Earth.
Wow. Okay.
And that with intensive farming, the country could produce enough wool, cotton, linen, silk to dress everyone more lavishly than King Solomon, plus enough food for everyone to eat like royalty.
He's not just throwing out numbers. He's trying to create a real aha moment
Mhm.
about the sheer potential for abundance, isn't he?
Totally. It makes you stop and think, like, how many resources are actually around us, often not used to their full potential?
So where does all this potential abundance come from, according to him?
It comes from what he calls the original substance, the fundamental building block of everything.
Like a formless stuff.
Pretty much. Formless matter or original substance. New forms are constantly being created from it, old ones dissolve back into it, but it's all expressions of this one thing.
And the crucial part is,
The supply of this formless stuff is presented as absolutely unlimited, infinite.
he uses the analogy that the universe itself didn't use it all up when it was created,
Yeah, think about that for a second. The raw material for everything is inexhaustible.
which connects directly to his claim that nature itself isn't core. There's enough for everyone. Scarcity, in this view, isn't the fundamental reality.
Right. And building on that, Wattles describes this original substance as being alive. It has creative energy.
So it's actively generating new forms.
Yes. He gives examples like, if more building materials were needed, they would just appear. The soil renews itself. He even suggests more gold and silver could be produced if humanity truly needed them. It's a vision of a responsive universe.
Okay, but he adds a really important clarification, doesn't he?
He does. This inherent abundance applies to humanity collectively. If individuals are experiencing poverty, it's because they aren't aligning themselves with that certain way of thinking and acting that he believes taps into this abundance.
So it comes back to the individual's approach again.
And this certain way isn't just about physical actions. It involves understanding the nature of this formless matter itself. He posits that it's intelligent. It thinks.
Intelligent substance.
Yeah.
Okay, that's taking it a step further.
And this intelligent substance has an inherent drive, like a natural inclination,
Towards what?
towards more life, towards expansion, fuller expression, more intelligence, more consciousness. He even links the creation of the entire universe to this life-seeking nature manifesting itself in form.
So wrapping up that part. Nature, the universe, is fundamentally set up for growth, progress, abundance. Lack only happens if we somehow contradict that underlying principle.
That's the essence of it. Lack arises when we're out of sync with this fundamental life-seeking drive of the universe.
And to bring the chapter home, he offers some reassurance.
Yeah, he promises and says he'll demonstrate it later in the book that the resources of this seemingly infinite formless supply are accessible.
Accessible to anyone who learns to think and act in that certain way.
Exactly. It's a powerful hook, setting the stage for the principles he'll lay out next.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Chapter 3, the key takeaways are pretty profound, actually.
I'd say so. First, opportunity isn't this fixed pie that gets carved up and disappears. It's constantly reshaping, new avenues always emerging.
And the direction of opportunity shifts with how society evolves. Understanding those shifts is potentially crucial.
Right. And even in tough circumstances, individual action, guided by the right principles that certain way, holds the key. It's not just about being pushed around by external forces.
And underpinning all of it is this radical idea of a universe just brimming with unlimited abundance.
Driven by an intelligent, life-seeking substance.
Yeah. So hopefully, for you, the listener, this chapter offered a maybe surprising perspective on opportunity and wealth. Food for thought without being overwhelming.
And it really leaves us with a big question to ponder, doesn't it?
Go on.
Thinking about this idea of a constantly evolving, fundamentally abundant universe. What areas in your own life or your field that seem monopolized or limited might actually hold hidden or emerging opportunities if you approach them in a new way? How could Wattles' perspective challenge your assumptions about limitations?
Wow. That's definitely something to chew on. Powerful stuff.
Indeed.
And just a little heads up for next time. Our next deep dive will tackle Chapter 4. That's where Wattles introduces what he calls the first principle in the science of getting rich.
Sounds like we get into the how-to a bit more.
Looks that way. So definitely join us for that exploration. Should be intriguing.